It's a computer. Welcome, everybody, the Mozillian Wizards, to Open Leader Training, week number 10, Empowering for Participation and Inclusion. My name's Rob. I'm here with Abby and Maha, and we're going to have a good session. We're set for 90 minutes. I'll drop a link to the Google Doc into the chat. If you don't have that, Abby's got me. Cool. Fill out your roll call. Drop a link to your Twitter and GitHub, and maybe a little emoji that represents the mood that you're feeling right now. Mine is a smirky cat, because my cat was being crazy this morning. And then our opening question: what is your favorite place? And include a pick. It could be a stock image, something from Google, just to give everyone a sense of, I don't know, where you feel like home is. We'll let those trickle through. And yeah, so we'll get on to the welcome. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had a good meeting last week with your mentor. And hopefully your project is sort of chugging along. This week is going to be kind of a fun week. This call anyways is focus on identifying again points in your project that could facilitate more inclusive behavior, and how to organize your project around that. Just a heads up, a reminder of our participation guidelines, and if you have an issue with that, you can always report that to myself or Abby. And we'll get right into it. So I think we're going to start off with Abby's going to give us an update on the Sprint for Internet Health. It's got a new name this year. She'll probably tell us about that.
Yes, thanks, Rob. So as many of you know, the global sprint this year, we're calling it the Sprint for Internet Health. It's happening for the entire month of May. I've been getting more questions about this, but I'm really excited to see you actually like invite contributors on your project during the month of May, and just seeing you practice working openly. It's usually a lot of fun. And we have a few new links for you. So maybe I'll share my screen. And okay, right now I'm sharing the Google Doc, but I will click. So we have an open events guide here for you. So it's here on the website. And it's just a lightweight, easy to use guide that you can use as a checklist as you're going through and planning your event. So your event can be like just getting people together to work on your specific project for a couple hours. It can be people just getting your community together to work wherever they want for the weekend. This is as flexible as you want. It just has to happen in the month of May, and then we'll feature it on Pulse. So yeah, it starts with like why open, pop your event. We've been using pop a lot here in Open Leaders, so I hope it's helpful with the purpose, outcome, and process. And gives you some tips on like road mapping your event and what to do. I'll actually go back to the Google Doc. So you can read more there. So planning your event, this is the main things you should do to take part in the Sprint for Internet Health this year. So first, just join the Gitter chat. It's linked here on line 64 in the notes. That's a great place to talk to a lot of other people who are participating, and even when your sprint is going on, that's a great place to sort of ask for help, or even find contributors if you're running more of like a distributed event. Some people like to do that. Pick a format. So this can be whatever format you want, a learning circle. It can be even like a study group if you want, or discussion group. If you want to get people to discuss something around your project or around the Internet Health Report. It's up to you, however you want to do this. I know a lot of you are working on specific like code projects, so you can have like a little hackathon on your project and just invite your community over, or invite whoever's interested to hack during that time, and you're there to answer questions. Find a space, either in person or online. If it's online, you might want a Zoom room or a video room or something where people will gather and sort of work together on something. Schedule the event, pick the time, days, and duration. I know a lot of you are students. It can be something like after school, or it can be like a full week thing if you really want to. That's a big commitment, actually. Maybe a weekend makes more sense. But yeah, Create participation guidelines, or you can use the community participation guidelines that Mozilla has. And you can check out the Internet Health Report, which is coming out in April. And the idea behind this sprint this year is really like sprinting on Internet health projects. So you can get inspired by that and see how your project relates to Internet health. I think all of yours do. That's why you were selected. So you can really, see how that ties in. This next section, announcing your event, reach out to your community, prepare your project for contribution, which is something you've all been doing the past few months. Is like getting your project ready for contributors. Then this one's important. Post your sprint event on Pulse. That's how we know it's a sprint event. And then we'll be, I'll be curating that to make sure it's all of your events, all of the sprint events, and making sure they show up somewhere. So use this link to post your event on Pulse. So I would wait till you've planned the general, like what you're gonna do so that you can describe it well, and then you post it here on Pulse, and then we'll approve it and it'll show up. And then, run your event, document it, and collect feedback afterwards. And there's even more notes on how to do that well and properly in the open event guide up here. So I hope these links are helpful. I hope this information helps you get an idea of what you should be doing. So as part of the program, we do ask that you do something for the sprint, or do something so that people are working on your project in the month of May. And our final, I think our final call is like very early May. So we'll use that as like a launch for the sprint. So we'll invite people to come watch your final demos and say, were you interested in any of these? Join their project this month. And it'll be a great way for you to promote your project and get some cool contributors. There's a section here for questions and comments. I know there's a lot of questions about the sprint, so I'll let you write your questions in here. And now I will start to answer questions I've already received. Let me think, what were they? Yes, it's flexible. You can do whatever you want in the month of May. The way you tell us you're doing it is through this link here. So please fill out this link, and to do it after you've sort of figured out the pop for your event. That way you'll have a clear post, and it's better at like attracting new contributors. I'll stop sharing. And also you can ask questions in the chat. Another question I got, we won't be sending out swag this year. I'm very sorry. Poor Rob.
I've got so many stickers still.
Yeah, this is true.
Could probably send that out. Recycle. Abby, I have a question. How much fun is the sprint?
An infinite amount of fun.
Correct.
It's a lot of fun. It's fun when we're all connected with video. It might be hard to do that for the entire month of May, but if we schedule things properly, we can like see each other in the different parts of the world, all working on projects for Internet health. And it's a great way to sort of bring a bit of momentum into your work. So now that you've been working so hard to make it really contributor friendly and very clear and easy to participate to, this is a great way just to like get that jump start. Yeah.
It's almost like you designed it like that. Yeah.
Maybe.
No, it's a super awesome event. I've done it the last couple of years, and I think it's like one of the very first events that I got involved in Mozilla, and it sort of snowballed into much bigger things. So watch out. Awesome. Yes. Excited about that.
So if you have any more questions, put it in the doc. I'll answer them in line. But yeah, thanks. Back to you, Rob.
All right. So back to the topic, and sort of, in tune with a lot of the, these higher level things like the sprint and just organizing your projects in general. To this week's sort of discussion and topic is sometimes difficult to talk about. So inclusion and diversity are things that everyone's talking about in their projects, and clearly an issue with the way things that are structured. And so really this week is focused on sort of exploring what that means and exploring what it means for you. And so we're going to start off with this quiz. And the quiz is just sort of meant to sort of show you what implicit bias is. So you have biases, and then you have implicit biases, which are things that are kind of out of your control. So they're either a factor of the way that you grew up or the environment that you were in. Lots of different things. So there's a link there. I guess we can drop into the chat too. We want everybody to go to that link, and then you can choose a couple of different quizzes. There's the gender career quiz or the gender science quiz. The layout of the page is kind of confusing, and sometimes you end up in the wrong spot. So if that happens to you, just raise a hand or wave or ask for help somehow. But go to that link. We're going to have 10 minutes here to fill out this quiz, and then we're going to talk about the results. So have at it. We'll give you 10 minutes, and then we'll meet back here at 23 after. I'm going to be good and write down times this week. Suppose we don't need to record this, but it's back on.
Okay.
It'll be abbreviated.
Oh, wait, Ms. Maha's great presentation.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Most of the text is on there anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, welcome back.
So hopefully you had some good discussions in your breakout room and had some time to look over the Google Doc. And we would just like it if you could just share some takeaway points of your discussion in the Google Doc. So we're going to give you just a couple minutes here for some silent G-docking.
And we're also getting a couple comments for Ma's presentation, so feel free to add more questions there or ask questions. And Ma's still here to answer them.
And since everybody is an anonymous animal, it's like it's a scream. Should all be anonymous animals. Except Abby, we know what you wrote.
I made the doc, so it knows who I am.
Someone, I think they asked a question, they're kind of answering it here. How do we get closer to the experiences of marginalized groups and listen to them is the best thing. One of the slightly confusing things about that is I think yes for them, but sometimes they also don't want the burden of having to explain things. And one of the things that I think matters with these kinds of things is to build relationships rather than just ask them one-off. So if there is no relationship between me and someone, sometimes it's really hard to ask the questions. So I guess, for example, as someone in my part of the world, I don't have a lot of access to homosexual individuals, but I have a lot of friends online who are. But I couldn't get into deep conversations about their experience about this until I'd known quite a good number of them for quite a few years, where I could then ask certain things where it doesn't feel like you're being offensive by asking about something. I mean, obviously for your projects, you probably don't need to ask something that's very sensitive, but in certain contexts, it matters just to try to build relationships first so that then you can ask for things like that. Someone's talking about inclusion and exclusion through the choice of language of a project, like English is a common international language, but it excludes a lot of people. That's true. So a lot of times people would have a certain level of education in class in order to speak English and to speak to others, but then you've excluded. So those people don't really represent necessarily their communities in that sense. It's one of the trickiest things also because all these automated language translation things do better for European to European languages, Latin-based languages. So they don't do too well with other languages. It's very tricky.
Maha, do you have any insight or advice about how to react? Or I'm just reading this one, taking responsibility and not being reactionary, because I think that is a very natural response, and catching yourself and just figuring out what's the first step to take in addressing it, especially if you're from a group that's in the majority.
Yeah, I read that one. I was thinking, yes, it is difficult to do this. I think one of the important things is to recognize if something is a trigger for you. So this happened to me recently. So as part of virtually connecting, we care a lot about what we call intentionally equitable hospitality, to be intentionally equitable in all we do. And so when it's something you are so explicit about wanting to do and then you fall short, this actually happens all the time. Every single person I know who talks the talk will eventually stumble when they're trying to do it, because you can't possibly, I think, recognize that you will never, it's never going to happen that you're going to be possibly inclusive of every single stakeholder or person or individual, like not stakeholder as in a broad persona, but actually every single individual that you want to include. Just recognize that this is not possible, and recognizing that, well, every time someone calls me out on this is a step towards learning more about it, and then maybe learning how to do it better. So for example, with Equity Unbound, we did an activity where people were posting pictures on Twitter, and then someone said, well, this is not very inclusive, people with visual disabilities. And what we said to them is, instead of getting upset that someone was calling us out in public for not being inclusive, even though we were all about equity, we asked them, let's develop a different activity that would be more inclusive. And all of us then learned about how to make Twitter and Google Slides and so on have alt text. So some of the slides I have on the unconscious bias have alt text so that people who have visual disabilities can use them. Not all of them, because I sometimes forget to do it, but we learned all that. So turn it into a learning opportunity, I think, and ask how you can do better. And know that this will keep happening to you. There is no way that this won't happen. And the fact that someone tells you, I think, means that they have hope that you will change. Because a lot of times I think people who are very, very discriminating or in a bad way and biased, sometimes people up on them, they don't tell them. So if someone tells you, this is actually, think of it as a good sign. I do. It's not a perfect sign, but it's a good sign that you're being told, so that people think you might be able to do something about it. People are talking about the language again, and that language choice will exclude people, and then providing multiple translations helps. One of the issues with translation is, and you guys can look up this very beautiful reading by Lina Munzir, and I'll put the text in the chat, the link in the chat, about war and translation, is that translation can also be very violent, because if the person who wrote the original cannot read the translation, they don't know if you translated in the way they meant. But of course, for accessibility, if it's something, knowledge that you want to spread, you do want to provide in as many languages as possible so people can find it. But with the recognition that it might have been transformed by the translation to something slightly different than what was intended. And thinking about things like on Wikipedia, the pages for certain political things have completely different stories in different languages, using the same data but coming up with very different conclusions. So that also influences the worldview that you see depending on which languages you speak. Okay, I think I'm gonna have to leave you guys so you have enough time to do whatever else you want to do. I'm just gonna post the link to the article I'm talking about, in case anyone wants to read it. And then I'll go. Thank you for
Thanks so
having
much,
me.
Anna.
Amazing.
It was
Thank you
really
so
great
much.
having you. I think we'll jump straight into the next part, which I think flows really nicely. Oh, and the link's there in the chat. But thanks so much, Maha. That was invaluable. Really appreciate it. And can everyone see my slides?
We can see them.
Awesome. You can see them. Cool. So this is a checklist that we actually put together at Mozilla as like the bare minimum for inclusion on an open source project before we fund them for things like the MOS Awards, the Mozilla Open Source Support Awards. And I thought we'd share this with you. You're not required to go through and put all this on. It's good practice if you are doing a project on GitHub. And I thought I'd just do a quick overview of the checklist items. So see if I can change slides. Oh, this is the template. I'm not a cat. All right. So pop for this. Purpose, this checklist provides open source projects with basics for evaluating the inclusive design in key areas. This checklist is intended to provide insight and education. So the outcome, you can use this checklist to apply best basic inclusion practices on your project. And we'll do this short presentation and you can discuss afterwards. Optional assignment is applying this checklist. So yeah, collaboration with diverse and inclusive communities. We have these two different definitions of like diversity and inclusion, and you can be a diverse community that's not inclusive, or you can be a very inclusive community that's not diverse. So diversity is really recognizing our differences, and then inclusion is embracing diversity and creating an environment where all kinds of people can succeed. For an example, like I think the Rust community is incredibly inclusive. It's very welcoming to newcomers. They're very good at getting consensus before making decisions. But if you look at who's actually in that community, it is like very predominantly white, predominantly male. So it's not quite as diverse. So they're working on adding more diversity. And today's talk is about, yeah, empowering for diversity and inclusion. Or wait, inclusion? Can't remember what I called it. It's okay. We'll move on to the next slide. So the first section in this checklist is governance. So this was an assignment that you had to do, but code of conduct. So this is here to help create a safe community for everyone. So making sure that you have a code of conduct, but also transparent enforcement procedure. So in the checklist, you have a code of conduct, or with Mozilla's case, it's community participation guidelines. It's visible from the main page. So whether that's the main page on GitHub or if you have a landing page somewhere. The following points are clear and transparent. So what are unacceptable and acceptable behaviors? How to report unacceptable behaviors? Who deals with the reports, ideally multiple individuals? And contact details for each individual. And there's a clear follow-up process with filed reports. So yeah, in this case, we have our community participation guidelines. They're linked at the top of the doc. Rob talks about them every single call. And you have our contact information at the top. And there is a process. We don't tell you what it is always. But yeah, after reporting, we do have a process for what to do with all these reports afterwards. We do file them, yeah. Okay. So for inspiration, here's a few links. They're in the slides. So that was the governance section. So this is leadership now. And this is an inclusive leadership cycle that this team had put together. So there's 6 steps around like inviting people to join your project, onboarding them, empowering them to do work, reviewing their work, recognizing their work, and then sort of renewing that invitation to continue participating. And maybe you're going to invite them in like a different capacity. So this is a nice inclusive leadership cycle. So yeah, leadership is central to project and community culture, and thus require intentional design and accountability for the empowerment of others. So let's just open them all up. Yeah, so these are the 5 points that they put in this checklist. So the leadership is designed with cycles of feedback with that review to avoid gatekeeping and to encourage inclusive behavior, because that was a problem we ran into in the past where we'd invite someone to be a leader, but we'd never follow up with them afterwards, and they sometimes would become gatekeepers for the community. responsibilities of leadership are clearly documented. So that's why we do have role descriptions for both like open leaders. When you're going through, you do have this role description. Same with mentors, same with cohort hosts. We recognize leadership equally, including non-technical leadership. Yeah. So even if someone's not writing code on your project, understand that they are providing valuable input and leading in your project. We recognize empowering others as core attributes of leadership and discourage self-promotion. We reach out to people we know would be great leaders, including underrepresented people who might not recognize their potential. So those are the check boxes for leadership. Next part is project and community design. This one's all about communication and language. So we talked about some of this with our community building section. Having a welcoming and open channel for community participation, avoiding jargon and other non-inclusive language, encouraging and recognizing the quietest voices, recognizing that the primary language of the project may not be the first language of all contributors, and we just had a discussion about that after Maha's presentation. And we have provided a way for everyone to share their pronouns and respect those in our conversations and communication. It's something we're actually trying to do better at with Mozilla Open Leaders. Yeah, being able to respect people's preferred pronouns. And then documentation. Have we taken one or more steps to improve the accessibility of our documentation or websites? And we encourage and support localization of our documentation. So yeah, making sure it is documented. And then under tasks, we provide non-technical tasks for first-time contributors to learn about and participate in our project. To encourage community leadership, we have good first PR label, encouraging people to support and maintain a review of PRs. Yeah, so just making sure there are good tasks, not just for technical contributors. And this one's newer that they've added, but adding this good first PR label. So if you have a new maintainer in your project, having like a good thing for them to review. So not even just good first bugs for like a new contributor, but having a good first PR for new maintainers. It's an interesting idea. All right, and that's all that they have in the checklist. So I might share, oh yeah, I'll stop sharing this. But there's a second link in the Google Doc that goes to a GitHub page. And this is just the checklist. This is the main source of truth for the checklist. So they constantly are updating this as like more best practices come about. And this is what they follow when they're giving out awards. So making sure that people can check off all these before they give them money. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to put it in the doc. Otherwise, we have 5 minutes left for Rob to close. Was someone writing in the doc? No. Okay. Go on, Rob.
Thanks, Abby. I didn't know about that resource. Is that new?
Yeah, it's pretty new. So we shared a little bit about it last round, but we didn't have slides yet or anything. So this is like, we've been using it for like a year now before giving out money. So yeah.
Totally. Cool. Well, I thought that the discussion on this call was really great. So thanks everybody for sort of putting yourself out there and talking about a topic that can be difficult to sort of address, but clearly very important. Hopefully the tools that we gave you will help you with your projects, and especially that checklist, going through that and just making sure that there's not something that you missed. Otherwise, so that's kind of the assignments, which are optional. Implementing the ideas that you saw during this call and from the checklist and the breakout sessions, which seem to be a hotbed for discussion. And then also just making everybody aware for the final demos. So Abby, can you correct me if I'm wrong, the sprint happens, or the official sprint happens after we're done?
Yeah, because our last call is like very early May, I think.
Okay.
So our final demos will be like the launch of the sprint. So that's a great place to invite people to your sprint event or project or whatever you're doing for that month.
Yeah. So the next couple, because there'll be a practice demo and then the final demo, right?
Yeah, so you're going to get another chance to practice in small groups and get feedback on your project or your presentation next time we come together. And then the time after that, it's the final one.
Totally. And then, so just be aware that we're going to ask you to just give a little blurb about your project. We'll do a practice round and we'll get feedback and stuff. And also, I found if you haven't talked to an expert yet, check out that list. Because that is also another good practice little blurb for your project where you can bring somebody in who hasn't been with you these past 10 weeks and sort of in half hour, which is a lot more time than the final demos, explaining your project and sort of showcasing it and getting some feedback before then. So there's plenty of time still to get those experts, talk to your mentor. Also, just a reminder, the Slack channel is open. So if you have questions that you want to put out there, you can always drop it in Slack. Otherwise, we have some open Q&A time. 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Good job, everybody. And can't wait for 2 weeks from now.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I'll stick around if you have any questions. But yeah, see you in a couple weeks.
Bye, everybody.